These are this afternoon's top stories. The Sugar Workers Restoration Fund office has opened in Bastille. Trinidad and Tobago's opposition leader commits to opening a general accounting office should his party win. And UN scientists are warning that drought could cripple crop production in Washington this year. Good afternoon and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Monday, 18th May 2015. I am JD Keynes. In national developments, former employees of the St. Kitts Sugar Manufacturing Corporation SSMC are one step closer to receiving a gratuitous payment for their years of service to the country's once booming sugar industry. This morning, Prime Minister the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris led the charge on his government's behalf when he delivered the feature address at the opening of a ceremony to launch the Sugar Workers Restoration Fund SWRC office. Held in the Clico building at the South Independence Square Street, the ceremony was broadcast live on ZIZ 96.1 FM and streamed at www.zizonline.com. The SWRF staff are expected to ensure that $16 million that was secured by the local government, courtesy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, is paid to former SSMC workers in a manner that is fair, accurate and transparent. We'll have more on this morning's ceremony in a subsequent newscast. This week's Board of Governors meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, is anticipated to produce benefits to St. Kitts and Nevis. Speaking at a recent press conference, Volvin Forsyth, who is the Assistant Bank Secretary at CDB, noted the benefits to be gained. He said not all of them are tangible.
You do have, coming back to the question of benefits, that's if you want to talk about it from a financial point of view, you will have quite a number of persons visiting. We do have almost over 250 delegates, right? And they will, in most cases, they do return back to the country. In terms of, we will have regional coverage in terms of the media, not only about the opening ceremony, but we will also have a number of clips showcasing St. Kitts and Nevis. So another benefit is in terms of spreading in terms of what is available, what you have in St. Kitts.
With the controversial May 11th elections now behind them, the people of Guyana are celebrating, and those living in the Federation are no exception. A day after the swearing in of the new government, the Guyanese community in St. Kitts came together to celebrate the change. Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris joined the celebrants and stressed the importance of democracy.
There are many commonalities between what has taken place in Guyana and what had taken place on the 16th in St. Kitts and Nevis. A long period of one government. And that is what the people of Guyana in the elections just over voted to change and to bring in a new fresh government with President Waindra, in the hope that he will take Guyana to a next level of development. I congratulate the people of Guyana for their lovely choice.
Regionally, in Trinidad, People's National Movement political leader Dr. Keith Rowley is beginning to lay his cards on the table and has announced that if his party comes to power, there will be, quote, a general accounting office which will allow for immediate oversight and intervention of the spending of public money.
Faces of the old and new, listening intently to the Diego Martin West MP Keith Rowley speaking about a 10-point plan that will be the basis for the PNM's work if it comes to power. Topping the list of issues to be tackled, crime. The PNM leader says both violent crimes and the white-collar variety are to be confronted. Dr. Rowley notes that fighting crime has been the major issue for 3 consecutive elections. It's an indication that it hasn't been reduced sufficiently as yet. He says it requires a sustained approach, and there is one area that he plans to deal with first up.
So therefore, whatever we advance as our policies and our programs on crime and criminality, security and insecurity, those have to be tested in the forge of sustainability. And we start with the police service, where the responsibility lies primarily, and the quality of that police service.
The total of the last 5 PNM budgets from 2006 to 2010 is $202.9 billion, whereas the total of the 5 People's Partnership budgets is $287.9 billion. Chunks of the budget over the last 5 years have been spent and not been fully accounted for. Recent examples of stray monies appear in the life sport fiasco and the National Energy Company issue. There has also been the case of the Auditor General's report on the PNM-controlled THA's financial statements from 2006, which only recently showed millions of dollars unaccounted for. Dr. Rowley says little has been put in place to ensure that the country gets value for money. Many times, he says, information about badly spent taxpayer dollars or corrupt practices only comes into the public domain after a news report or a politician busts a mark. The PNM solution for a tighter grip and a more watchful eye on the National Treasury is something the PNM is calling a General Accounting Office,
which will allow for an intervention and an ongoing oversight of operations as and when money being spent in various government departments, so that there would be a requirement for those who are spending money to subject themselves to people who will come in to ensure at the time when it is being done, that it is being done in the way it is expected to be done.
He suggests that if and when wrongdoing is found, there will be systems in place to rectify the problem before it gets out of control. The Auditor General's report, which is currently in place, often reports several years after monies have been spent, providing information for when state boards and sometimes governments are no longer in place. The United States of America has a Government Accountability Office, which is independent and reports to the U.S. Congress. It is sometimes referred to as the Congressional Watchdog or the taxpayer's best friend. Jabari Fraser, TV6 News.
They are iconic symbols of Cuba, like cigars and rum. Pre-revolution 1950s American classic cars, however, with thawing relations between Cuba and the U.S. car enthusiasts, are pondering the future of Cuba's unique collection of motor vehicles.
Like cigars and rum, they're iconic symbols of Cuba. But the pre-revolution Cadillacs and Chevrolets are not nostalgic collector's items. They're necessities for Cubans, and breakdowns are frequent. Maintenance can be a nightmare for workshops such as Nostalgicar in Havana. Spare parts are increasingly hard to find. The thaw in American-Cuban relations has focused thoughts on the future should trade barriers come down. I think what could happen in Cuba is that modern cars will quickly follow in the streets, but there'll still be a niche market for classic cars. Cuba, of course, faces questions beyond the fate of the 1950s vehicles, described as a legacy of the country's isolation. What does Cuba need to make you optimistic? The answer is diplomatic. I believe in the changes taking place. As for the cars, despite their glossy external appearance, some, including our correspondent, warned that after years of Heath Robinson repairs, many are more fit for the scrap heap than the auction house.
The old Eisenhower cruisers are a colorful reminder of Cuba being stuck in the past. Fascinating for tourists, but a hassle for Cubans. Many here would love to see them disappear, if Cuba were to embrace the 21st century. Stefan Grober, Euronews, Havana, Cuba.
Internationally, recent droughts are expected to cost Washington state farmers $1 billion in crop losses this year. The state is offering incentives for farmers willing to sacrifice some crops to save water. In California, the drought is well into its 4th year, but that may only be the beginning. A new study predicts parts of the U.S. will suffer decade-long dry spells. Rob Reynolds reports from Los Angeles.
Normally, these peaks in the U.S. state of Washington are covered in snow. But this year, they're barely dusted with white. Only 16% of normal. Streams flowing from the mountains are low. And that's bad news for farmers and produce vendors at this fruit and vegetable market in Olympia, where Mike Kinnick sells his wares.
Cherries, peaches, apricots, tomatoes, watermelons, honeydew.
Washington Governor Jay Inslee declared a state of emergency.
We're seeing things happen at this time of year we just have never seen before.
The drought is expected to cost Washington farmers $1 billion in crop losses this year. The state is offering incentives for farmers willing to sacrifice some crops to save water. Here in California, the drought is already well into its 4th year, but that may be only the beginning. A new study predicts parts of the U.S. may suffer from dry spells that last for decades. Using tree rings to compare past rainfall levels and powerful computer modeling, scientists at NASA and Columbia University forecast droughts far worse than those of the past millennium, in part due to global warming.
These droughts really represent events that nobody in the history of the United States has ever had to deal with.
In the past, droughts in the same area have destroyed whole civilizations. An extended dry spell in the 13th century ended a flourishing civilization of Native American people known as the Anasazi. Their fate is a warning from the past for the society of today. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles.
Approximately 100,000 people, many of whom are women and children, escaped violent clashes in Burundi to neighboring Tanzania and beyond, as the situation in Burundi remains volatile. Gavino Gare reports.
This 100-year-old vessel is dear to many, fleeing the violence in Burundi. Old as it is, the German boat has become a savior to the Burundian refugees. It transports 1,200 people daily from Kagunga village to the Tanzanian port of Kigoma. And it cannot keep up with some 2,000 daily arrivals. The camp at Kagunga is filled with mostly women and children who have been sleeping out in the rain. They are squeezed into a confined space with a shortage of latrines and drinking water in a village that is normally home to 12,000 people. More than 70,000 refugees have arrived in Tanzania, with most currently gathering at the Kagunga reception area, where they are slowly being transported to the Nyarugusu camp by boat, then trucks. There are 26,000 refugees in Rwanda, 17,000 in Nyarugusu refugee camp further inland in Tanzania, and more than 7,000 in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is according to the UNHCR. Up to 50,000 people are stranded in an overcrowded lakeside village on the border with Tanzania, as aid agencies warn of mounting tension with local people in fear of disease. Aid agencies are preparing for the regional crisis to worsen following an attempted coup in Burundi. It is the worst violence to hit the small Central African nation since its 12-year civil war that ended in 2005. Roadblocks and the closure of borders have been making it hard for people to flee, as protests erupted over President Pierre Nkurunziza's plan to run for a 3rd term.
Turning now to the weather. Today will be partly cloudy to cloudy with slightly hazy, with a slight chance of few showers later today. Tonight we can expect partly cloudy to cloudy conditions with slight haze and a chance of few showers developing. The temperature will peak at 29 degrees Celsius with a low of 24 degrees tonight. Winds are blowing from the east at 9 to 17 miles per hour. Seas are slight to moderate with waves of 1.2 to 1.5 meters or 4 to 5 feet. The weather brings us to the end of ZIZ's Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thanks for joining us. I'm JD Gaines. Have a great afternoon.